We have a quorum. We can start the meeting. First, according to the decision made by the House Committee on the meeting on the 5th of June, it was agreed that the Subcommittee on 12 pieces of subsidiary legislation relating to the prevention and control of disease and gazetted respectively on the 27th of March, 28th of March, 1st of April, 28th of April, the 5th of May, and 19th May 2020 should also look into 4 pieces of sub-legislation made in accordance with Section 8 of the Prevention and Control of Disease Ordinance Cap 599 and gazetted on the 2nd of June, i.e. Legal Notices 116 to 119, 2020. And also invitations have been sent out to members. The subcommittee's name is now changed to Subcommittee on Subsidiary Legislation relating to the Prevention and Control of Disease. We have a new member, the Honorable Mr. Yu Si-wing. So please confirm that. And also, please also confirm that I shall be the chair of this subcommittee. Is there any questions? Okay. Now, I will first invite the government officials to join us. So meanwhile, I would like to tell the members that we are going to look into 4 pieces of sub-legislation. We shall discuss the policy matters on these 4 legislation altogether. Please raise your questions concerning the legislations, and then we will vet the sub-legislation course by course. And also, please notice that on the 24th of June Council meeting, the vetting period shall expire. So the notice period is, the deadline of notice is the 17th of June. So as usual, we are going to move that we have to report to the House Committee before the deadline of notice. In case members will leave the venue later, so we shall move for an extension of the vetting period of these 4 pieces of sub-legislation till the council meeting of the next term. We will need this extension because maybe some of you will leave later on. So I would like to tell you the timetable first, because we have to, because our notice period will close on the 17th of June, and also it has to be moved on the 24th of June. So first, I would like to invite Dr. Choi Dek-yi, the Undersecretary for Public Health, to present Legal Notice 116 to 119 to us. Thank you, Chair. On the 2nd of June, the government announced that for the existing restrictions, measures on social gathering, including the regulations under the Prevention and Control of Disease requirements and directions, business and premises, including catering business and also immigration control, there will be adjustments because there are signs of leveling out in terms of COVID-19, but we also have sporadic cases. So we need to strike a balance between public health risk and social and economic needs. So the amendments including amending 599G and F, that is the Prevention and Control of Disease requirements and directions, business and premises regulation, and also prohibition on group gathering to extend to the 31st of August. And also there are amendments in terms of scheduled premises and the requirements made to them. For 599G, prohibition on group gathering, it was extended to the 16th of June. Concerning immigration control measures, there were 3 amendments. The first one is establishing a mechanism to empower the Secretary for Food and Health to designate 2 categories of places with different requirements for quarantine. For Category 1, they have to receive compulsory quarantine. But for Category 2, if travelers have tested negative for COVID-19, they will be exempted from quarantine. And also, the Chief Secretary for Administration's power to exempt travelers from quarantine under 599G have been expanded. Those people who traveling is necessary for purposes relating to manufacturing operations, business activities, or the provision of professional services in the interest of Hong Kong's economic development will be waived. And also these amendments, the expiry dates have been extended to the 7th of July and also the 18th of September. So I will open the floor for questions. 4 minutes for each. Mr. Chen Zhenchong. Thank you, Chair. With the latest developments of the disease, the compulsory quarantine requirement has been extended to July. The exemption category is quite limited. Since May, those who engage in manufacturing in the mainland, dentists, accountants, logistics, and also listed companies, stakeholders are exempted. But as I said, those engaging in financial industry should also be waived. I'm representing the bank industry. I have liaised with Secretary Hui of the Financial Services and Treasury, and we have some ideas. There have been talks about using the health cooks as a mutual recognition system. Shall we use this system to replace exemptions by industry? And also, media has reported that because of the fluctuation of the disease, despite the progress in the health cooks, the government's view is that we should do it on a trial basis. So we may need to put this health cook system on hold. So is that true? If that is so, we need to speed up on applying for exemption again, because if we are not using the health code, then we need to apply for exemption industry by industry. So I need to press for the exemption on financial industry again. The government has exempted certain industries, and meanwhile, health code system is being looked into. So in the end, if the health code system is put into place, will we cease exemptions by industries? Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. I will give you a brief reply, and I will delegate to Deputy Secretary for supplement. Mr. Chen, you were talking about 599C quarantine measures for people coming from arriving at Hong Kong. So we have been looking very carefully at the developments of the disease, about the risk for mainlanders coming into Hong Kong, and also we need to ensure that the supply of goods or services required for the normal operation of Hong Kong cannot stop. So there have been some exemptions, and with the passage of time, different exemptions have been added, and bureaus have been liaising with industries, and there have been liaisons. And in the end, the Chief Secretary for Administration approved these exemptions. So there have been adjustments all along. If the financial industry considers that that is the need, we can further discuss with the Bureau and carry out public health risk, and the decision will be made by the CS4A. About the health code system between Hong Kong, mainland, and Macau, it is a direction that we are looking into, because to a certain extent, it can cope with the needs for logistics and the movement of people. But the basic consideration is that the situation is leveling out, and also we have to think about the number of users and also administration issues. So these are the factors we are considering. Mr. Chen, please. Concerning the members' question, the amendments on 599C and E empowers the Secretary to designate places into two categories. For Category 1 specified places, all travelers have to undergo a compulsory quarantine. Those who need to make necessary trips have to apply for exemptions. For Category 1 specified place, they need to apply for exemption. Otherwise, they will have to undergo compulsory quarantine. If the situation has improved, the Secretary can specify places as Category 2 places. For Category 2 places, if a person satisfies certain criteria, for example, having tested negative for COVID-19 or having met other conditions, they will not need to undergo quarantine. For Category 2 places, it will be a universal approach. So we will not designate certain groups of people who are exempted. So far, we don't have any Category 2 places, but with the improvements of the situation, I think we can change certain places into Category 2.
Well, thank you. The Secretary haven't quite answered Mr. Chen's question, which is significant. He'd like to find out about the scope of the health code. Last week, we thought that it was happening this week. If the scope is not sufficiently broad, then he will have to seek exemption from the CS. Can you tell us a little bit more about the health code? I'm not sure whether I've interpreted you wrong, Mr. Chen. I defer to Mr. Chen. Yes, the governments of the three places are still in discussion. The Guangdong and Macau fall into the Category 1 places. And if trips have to be made, they still have to seek exemption from the CS to exempt the quarantine arrangement. Mr. Chen. I'll liaise with the FSTB and seek exemption for the categories that I mentioned. Ms. Vincent Cheng, also on the question of health code, Hong Kong's situation has stabilized in terms of the pandemic, and there is a need for the three places for the businessmen to get the health code, and also the same can be said about the private individuals. Over the past couple of months, some lost their jobs, some cannot reunite with the family members, and the business dealt a severe blow. How can we strike a balance is the key question. Health code is one of the ways for us to have the COVID test, and then people will be allowed into and out of these places. Now, we haven't got the announcement of the health code so far, and I hope that the health code can be up and running as soon as possible. In Macau, they've been doing this for some time, and things are pretty smooth, and I hope that in Hong Kong we can do likewise. Also, Mr. Chen Chenying said that it covers so many different sectors. For Category B, in the interest of Hong Kong's economic development, that this covers so many different sectors. I don't think we should cover the bosses. Those lower down the hierarchy should also be allowed to apply for the health code. Also, there is talk of the exorbitant expensive cost for the COVID test is anything up to $1,000. In Macau, it is half or a quarter of what it is charged in Hong Kong. So in terms of the number of testing centers, will there be more coming on stream, and will you be seeking to cut the cost for testing. Under Secretary or Mr. Chen? Deputy Secretary, Mr. Chen. Madam Chair, it is very clear that we are seeking mutual recognition of the nucleic test result on the part of the three places. That much is clear. The governments are in close discussion, although we cannot make any announcement for the time being. We try to make the announcement as soon as possible. Yes, the testing fees. Under 599C, the CS has exempted 30 or so different categories, and this covers the cross-boundary drivers, the seafarers, and so on. So we're not merely talking about people in the employers categories. So that there are exemptions there. And also the cross-boundary students are allowed back into Hong Kong for schooling. I hope the members would appreciate that until we get the pandemic under control, there is a likelihood that there might be a resurgence of the disease. So we've got to tread carefully. I think the governments of the three places have to tread carefully in limiting the movement of the population. It's unlikely that we will open up fully in the short term. Under 599E, as a result of the amendments, there will be a statutory framework whereby if the pandemic is under control, if the situation is similar in both places, then we will have the condition for mutual recognition, and then we will be proceeding to open up on a gradual basis. We have the framework, although we haven't quite reached the time where we can fully open up. But it all depends on the state of the pandemic, and get on with the discussion. What about the testing fees? Yes, indeed. We also notice that in Hong Kong, in the private sector, the testing volume is not particularly high, and we are starting discussion over the mutual recognition of the test result, and there are more private laboratories that are becoming part of the exercise. We believe that when there is a demand in the market, when competition is increasing, that the fees will stand a pretty good chance of further reduction. The government will be liaising with the laboratories to see how the process can be streamlined, and also whether the fees can be further scaled back. This will be followed up. Just follow up, Chairman. I don't think we should allow the market to determine the fees, because this is going to be ultimately expensive. The government should step in to a certain extent. Right? You've heard that. Mr. Yu Si-wing, please. Madam Chair, thank you. The pandemic started in January. It was pretty dire at the very beginning, but as the government and the members of the public are taking sufficient measures and the situation has stabilized, there may be sporadic odd cases flaring up, but these are individual cases. So in our review, I hope that the administration would not be as stringent as at the beginning. One case flaring up, it would make it as if the whole place is under stress, and I hope that there would be measures to open up the economy in a suitable way. The economic lockdown will affect people's livelihood. It will affect the job market in the tourism trade. People are on zero pay for the inbound and outbound travels. So when the government is dealing with these cases, Will you adopt a more open-minded attitude to strike a balance between disease control and the economy? You should not have an across-the-board approach. If one case flares up, then the whole of Hong Kong will be grinding to a halt. I hope that you will be striking a balance. Maybe it's going to be an endemic disease in Hong Kong, which cannot be wiped out altogether. If you do not conduct a review, the economy in Hong Kong will suffer tremendously. Second, in Macau, or indeed Shenzhen and Zhuhai, the situation has become stable. Will you be opening up a little bit more? There are scores of different people you talked about, but the scope remains pretty narrow still. Going forward, I'm not sure how soon you're going to have a more relaxed situation. In Macau, they haven't seen a confirmed case for 2 months. If they accept our situation, maybe we can open up to Macau first. And the Ocean Park is back up and running. The Disneyland is back up and running again. I think where possible, we can open up ourselves to Macau first. And then we move on gradually to other places. Otherwise, Hong Kong will be stuck in the current situation without any improvement. So policy-wise, I'm wondering whether you can reposition yourself and let us know more clearly about the kind of places you will be opening up to. Under Secretary, thanks very much, Mr. Yu. Let me answer the first question. I defer to Mr. Chen for the second one. Right, on the question of control of the disease and all the corresponding measures, it was in March or early April that we were at our peak. We had 30, 40, 60 cases in a single day, and I'm sure that this is still fresh in our consciousness. As the disease eases up, I think we have to strike a balance between the control of the disease and the need of the economy and the community. So in terms of the F&B sector and also the scheduled premises and the opening up in these areas, I think we have been relaxing the control for the catering. We started off with 4. We relaxed it to 8 in terms of group gathering. And we also have the relaxation of the restriction on the scheduled premises. While we keep control of the local infection, we can also reinvigorate the activities in Hong Kong. So members can rest assured that we are relaxing on a gradual basis. As regards the control of movement of people, it has to do with the control of imported cases. So people coming back from outside will be subject to a test. It's only when the test results become available that we impose the quarantine. These measures are inspiring confidence in the people. I defer to Mr. Chen for the second question. Yes, indeed, Madam Chair. Together with Guangdong and Macau governments, we are in discussion and seek to achieve the maximum relaxation as and when the infection is under control. That's the way to go. For different places, we can impose different requirements depending on the infection situation in these places and also the infection situation in Hong Kong. We are in discussion with Guangdong and Macau governments in this regard. And we are moving in this direction. And we hope that the infection situation permitting, we will be restoring the movement of people between the three places. Mr. Christopher Chung, Madam Chair, I understand that the situation can be in a state of flux, and I think quarantine measures are necessary, but we have to bear in mind the business interaction between Hong Kong and the mainland. I did put a question twice before. I was asking whether the senior executives of the financial sector can be exempted. On the 5th of June, in the newly announced measures, this was extended to 2 directors or executives of listed companies. And our sector does have a very close liaison with the mainland. So I'm wondering whether the financial sector, the senior executives of the financial sector can be included as well.
Second question. We have been discussing about the health code, and we thought the health code system would be rolled out soon. But what is the content, and how many quotas will be given to each industry? Will it include financial industry? I understand that the price is quite expensive, $1,500 to $2,000 for a test valid for 7 days. But I think it is very unfair that it only applies to Hong Kong citizens, because senior executives in the mainland have been contributing a lot to Hong Kong's financial system. For example, the IPOs, they always involved tens of billions. Large amounts of money are being raised. So if we do not extend the exemption to senior executives in the financial industry in the mainland, it will hamper our economy. So will the government consider that after the health code system is rolled out, the senior executives of financial industry in the mainland should also be covered? Thank you, Mr. Christopher Chung, for your question. You mentioned that some would like to apply for exemption under 599C. As I explained, now we have 31 categories being exempted. And of course, the industry can keep on application with the CS4A, and also for the quotas, if the need is very real, we will consider expanding the quotas as well. And Mr. Chan will talk about the quotas for Hong Kong citizens and non-Hong Kong citizens. Chair, our current exemption is not just limited to Hong Kong citizens. For those living in the mainland, if they can meet the criteria for exemption, they can also apply for it. In fact, there are non-Hong Kong citizens who have successfully applied for these exemptions. I understand Mr. Christopher Chung's wish to have the exemption extended. After the previous meeting, we have taken your view to the Financial Services and Treasury Bureau. So for senior executives in the mainland, they are also eligible for applying for exemption. I think this will be a great help to our industry. As you can all see, a lot of industries have been hard hit. This year, our taxes, in particular, particularly in rates, our industry have contributed a lot. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The exemption for travelers arriving from Macau and Taiwan, there are more and more categories for exemption. And one category is related to the manufacturing and construction industry. For example, those materials, construction materials, manufactured in the mainland for construction of the free runway projects in Hong Kong, and also for the construction of public housing. Professionals have to go to the mainland for quality checking of these prefab units. Another category is factory. You need to allow factory workers to go back to the factory. Now we are just allowing them to be exempted from compulsory quarantine when they come back to Hong Kong. But what about the other direction? For those traveling from Hong Kong to the mainland, what about them? They need to go to the construction sites to check the material. If they have to undergo 14-day quarantine, then there's very little that they can do. So it seems that a lot of the measures are one way. It does not help to facilitate movements of people both ways. And we are quite disappointed about health cook. Why do we have to separate health cooks into Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong's health cook? Why cannot we have a Guangdong, Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong health cook? Many in my industry are confused. After a certain period of time, after doing a test, the health code will expire because it is only valid for a certain period of time. Can we find a way to extend the Hong Kong health code after someone's health code expire? These are all very confusing. Why cannot we have a standardized health code for the Greater Bay Area? We share a lot of mechanism in the Greater Bay Area, but why not this one? Why cannot we achieve a standardization? Health code is not just for crossing the border. If you do not have a health code, you cannot gain access to many places. So we do not understand what the Hong Kong health code will do. So would you please explain to us? I will invite Mr. Chen to answer. Deputy Secretary, please. Chair, we understand that under 599C, the government is able to give exemption for people arriving to Hong Kong from Macau or the mainland if they meet certain requirements. But for those embarking from Hong Kong, traveling to other areas, they have to meet the quarantine requirements of that place. In mainland, in particular, Guangdong province and Macau and Hong Kong, we have been doing a fairly good job in controlling the disease. So we have been discussing with the Guangdong government and the Macau government that under certain circumstances, we can exempt people from undergoing 14-day quarantine in both places. So we will announce our results when we have reached a conclusion. For the health code for 3 places, we are developing the Hong Kong's health code. For the health code in Guangdong province and Macau, they serve a different purpose. For the Guangdong health code, it is not just for crossing the border. For people's movements in the province, they also need to have the health code. So if we have to standardize Hong Kong's health code with the Macau and Guangdong province's health code, it would give rise to privacy issue. That means passing Hong Kong citizens' information to other authorities. So we are now looking in the direction of mutual recognition of health codes. For example, if a Hong Kong citizen has done a test in Macau or the Guangdong province, maybe we can recognize the test results in Hong Kong. Then the person does not have to do another test after returning. So we are talking about mutual recognition. For the Hong Kong Health Code, it will be mainly used for crossing the border. We are not trying to do a health code system like the Guangdong province one for local movement. The main consideration is to protect the privacy of Hong Kong citizens, because data will be collected in the during local movement. Chair, the Deputy Secretary is just repeating my question rather than giving me an answer. We still have unsolved issues for necessary travel between the two places. The answer you gave me is just it is under discussion, but this discussion has been going on for 2 months. Many members have been asking about the health code because it is much anticipated. So you have heard members' views, so please speed up the process. Chair, the simplest way is to have a Greater Bay Area health code, because since we are having much cooperation already. So Under Secretary, please take note of the members' view. Shuka Fai, please. Now, Mr. Chen, you promised to ask about exemption for retail business with the mainland authority. So what is the progress? As I said last time, for retail business travelers, if they are eligible for exemption under the current system, they can apply for it. For example, if they are involved in supply of goods necessary for Hong Kong. But about exempting retail business travelers as a whole, this is under consideration. Now, you have been telling me the same thing. Of course, I understand for goods supplied by the mainland to Hong Kong, but what about those suppliers from Hong Kong to mainland? So you promised to ask for me. So have you asked the question for me? So we have 30-something categories of exemption. One of the category is those industries, business activities, or the provision of professional services in the interest of Hong Kong's economic development. So we have this category already. For the scope, I think it needs to be designed by the relevant departments. So I have already taken up the request of the member to the relevant departments for consideration. So you mentioned those in the interest of Hong Kong's economic development. Say some retailers have a branch in the mainland. Of course, that would be in the interest of Hong Kong's economic development, so they should be included. So I'm going to tell those in my industry that. And also about the Macau, Guangdong province, and Hong Kong health code. Well, it seems that privacy issues would be involved. So why is that? Under Secretary, Deputy Secretary, please. Chair. The health codes for different places serve different purposes, and different information or data will be involved. For example, the Guangdong health codes, besides test results, there are other uses. For example, the places a certain person has been to. But for Macau and Hong Kong health codes, so far they are only for the purpose of crossing the boundary. That means someone has undergone a test and the result is negative. That's all. If we need to give these data to the authorities of another place, privacy concerns will arise. So the direction we are looking at is a mutually recognized health code system, which does not involve transmittance of data. When you cross the border, you simply give the other authorities to health code rather than transmitting the data to them. In order to facilitate the travel. So what about Zhuhai and Macau? Is that what they're doing? Yes, as far as I understand, they are using a mutually recognized system. So no privacy concerns. I'm not sure about the details, but if it is a mutually recognized system, no transmittance of data is involved.
So this is just a mutual recognition, but not a mutual access. So they don't get access to the personal data, do they? So there will be no privacy problems, are there? Why do you bring up the privacy problems? For Macau and Guangdong, this is just a mutual recognition. But still, you have to do it. This has been talked about for so long. Do I have to press a button again? Some had it longer than me. So how soon can this be done? Why do you fail to get this done? Why can they get it off the ground in Macau but not in Hong Kong? Undersecretary? Right, the mutual recognition of the health code is a technical measure. So this is a means to ascertain the state of health of an individual for the past 7 days. To facilitate the movement of people between the 3 places, we do understand that, but other than resolving the technical matters, we have to have regard to the pressure on different places. These have to be considered by different governments. Although we are moving in this direction, given the fact that the infection situation has eased, and we have to address some the issues relating to livelihood and business. But it would take a bit of time. Mr. Xiu, well, this has been talked about for so long. The business sector has started talking about it, and the DAB and other members are also raising issues. The businessmen cannot travel across the border, and the factory owners cannot travel across the border. There is a case in which a person's father, who is 80, 90-year-old, and he's in hospital and he cannot travel to the mainland in Shun Tak. And I hope that you will let us have the information quicker. So how soon do you expect this to happen? Within this month, or is it something that is beyond your grasp? Many members put similar questions this morning. I don't think I have a specific timetable. Except to say that we cannot anticipate the changes to the pandemic. As the pandemic has leveled off, we have relaxed the measures regarding social distancing. But as soon as we have changes to the pandemic, we have to take additional measures. And although we do move in this direction. Right, let me get my questions in for the first round. Whatever testing you carry out, or whatever border control you impose, It has to do with the assessment of the cases in Hong Kong. We've seen the clusters in Lake Yuen Estate and also in Lei Muk Shi Estate. And the experts seem to be not on the same page. And it was said that it is likely to be airborne because the virus was picked up at the lower respiratory tract. And other experts talked about the environmental factors. I'd like to hear from the administration. Are we sure that there is silent chain of transmission in the light of the Lei Muk Shi cluster and Lake Yuen cluster? We haven't identified the source of the infection. How do you view how to assess the latest risk in Hong Kong? I must agree that given the risk, we cannot relax the measures altogether. It has to happen on a gradual basis. Why is it that we have the book fair, the ocean park, the Disneyland, where people are gathering? Why do you relax the restriction? How can you group people in groups of 8 in the book fair? Are you going to relax the group gathering ban? Instead of 8 people, you will relax more in the light of the book fair taking place. I can't see the consistency of the policy. In the light of the opening up of the Ocean Park, the Disneyland, and the book fair, you seem to be extra cautious about the border crossings. Also, there are some foreign domestic helpers. 8,000 to 10,000 FDHs are likely to be coming to Hong Kong from the Philippines and Indonesia. They are very much part of Hong Kong, helping the families in Hong Kong, but the families are very worried. Many employers said that they don't have any place for quarantine for the domestic helpers. And I hope that you have to bear in mind that there are many who are waiting for a space in Chunyang Estate. Now, for the foreign domestic helpers who are coming to Hong Kong, will you be offering them some assistance? It is very much the responsibility of the employers, but they said that the government should offer some assistance in making the arrangement. I hope that you would have some quarantine measures in the light of the risks, because otherwise, the Chunyang Estate will not be surrendered back for occupation. We are talking about 8,000 to 10,000. You said many times that there are many units available in Chunyang Estate. Will you give us the guarantee that if you want to assist these foreign domestic helpers, will you use other quarantine centers? There are 4 questions. And let me take the second and the fourth ones, and the other ones, the Sha-Tin cluster and so on, I defer to my colleague, Dr. Leung. On the second question, in the past or recent past, the government has relaxed certain restrictions on the condition that we do it on a gradual basis. Unlike the scheduled premises and unlike the F&B premises, and also unlike any other activities, when considering relaxation, the government has to proceed carefully on a step-by-step basis. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all kind of situation. We cannot apply one single criterion and relax the restriction. Where we can relax the situation, we will, to facilitate the public and also to facilitate the business activities. So when the infection has leveled off, like in the past few weeks, we may have imported cases, and still we saw 2 clusters which are 2 to 3 weeks apart. And unless there is an upsurge in the clusters, it would be easier for us to get to grips with the situation. We'll be more confident in relaxing the restrictions on other areas. We do have the plan to do so. As regards the Chunyang estate, we said many times that as the Penny's Bay units will be coming on stream in September, we will be able to release Chunyang estate to the members of the public. On the first question about the Sha Tin cluster, I defer to the doctor. Yes, the situation has become stable in Hong Kong, and the number of cases remain low, although we cannot say that there is no risk at all. So we would try to pick up the cases as early as possible and do the contact tracing, and also the quarantine and isolation. And we will conduct a larger scale testing to identify the silent carriers. Over the past 6 months, we've seen a sharp reduction in the number of cases. Most of the cases are imported cases. We have taken a whole host of measures to prevent the imported cases from spreading in the community. But we've picked up 2 clusters in the recent past. The first one is 3 cases in the Lei Muk Shu cluster with contact trace. We have done a lot of things, still could not identify the source. The cluster of Lek Yuen involves 12 cases. 9 of them are living in Luk Chun House in Lek Yuen Estate. 5 of them are in units 12 and 10, and they are side by side. We have conducted epidemiological and environmental tests in Luk Chun House. The environmental samples are tested negative. On Sunday, together with Professor Yun Kwok Yung, we conducted another visit in Luk Chun House. Is there an environmental factor that contributes to a transmission? This is something that remains to be verified. The Bureau, the DH, and the Housing Department, EPD, and so on, along with the HKU and HKUST scholars, will be collecting further information to ascertain whether there is any environmental factor that causes the transmission in Luk Chun House. We remain cautious for the time being. Units 12 and 10, all the residents have been moved to the quarantine center. On Saturday, we had a new sufferer. All the other people have not shown any symptoms. There will be a second deep throat saliva test for Luk Chun House. So for these 2 clusters, they show that in the community out there, definitely there are silent cases, and there is likely to be a chain of transmission. Some of them have mild symptoms, they probably wouldn't seek medical attention, and some are asymptomatic, although they remain infectious. So our policy is to broaden the scope in order to identify the carriers as soon as possible, and through contact tracing, we can cut off the chain of transmission. In the days to come, we can expect that there may be sporadic cases, there may be an upsurge in terms of clusters, and the situation is still pretty serious in other places, and Hong Kong cannot be isolated. I'd like to invite Dr. Leung. Yes, for the foreign domestic helpers, we fully appreciate that there will be a large number of them coming to Hong Kong under the existing law. Those under quarantine can do so at home, or they can do the quarantine in a hotel. My understanding is that under the law, the employers do have the obligation to provide accommodation for the foreign domestic helpers. In general, there were some foreign domestic helpers who came back to Hong Kong, and they wouldn't be quarantined in the quarantine centers because, as I said, the employers do have the duty to provide accommodation. The administration heard the sentiments of the public. If there is a huge number of foreign domestic helpers coming to Hong Kong, and it would be expensive to put them in a hotel, and we will be liaising with the relevant department to see whether assistance can be rendered to help the members of the public in the situation where they need to accommodate their foreign domestic helpers for quarantine. Thank you, Dr. Leung. I'm Xu Wing for the second round, please. Madam Chair. Also, the fees for the health code. My understanding is that it's going to be costing anything between 1,000 to 1,400. 1,000 still is a little bit on the high side of those who need the health code. It would be very expensive. Ordinary people probably wouldn't choose to get the health code.
So the governments need to consider the need after movements of people increase. Now in Macau, the price is $150, and in Shenzhen, it is 124 RMB. The government needs to have some concrete measures to meet people's need rather than letting the market decide the price. So the governments need to suppress the price within $200. So with more testings done, movements across the Greater Bay Area can be facilitated. And the Deputy Secretary mentioned about the privacy concerns. In Shenzhen, we have a Hong Kong U hospital. Maybe we can work with them. We can send the samples for them to test there, so the cost will be lower. The private laboratory does not know how many people will come to test, so they will just charge everyone individually, so the price would be high. So the government needs to look at it from the point of view of social and economic needs rather than letting the markets decide it. This is just one of the ways to do it. And second, about the group gathering prohibition. For F&B, 8 people are allowed. There may be relaxation later, but for ballrooms and convention rooms in hotels, the limit is 50. But no food and beverages can be provided. I've received a lot of complaints. People have booked a ballroom for having a wedding banquet. Now the limit is 50, but no food and beverages can be provided. Can there be relaxation for wedding banquet halls? You can separate people into groups of 8, like the catering business, rather than having a different set of requirements for banquet halls. Because many people are getting married, they will be heavily affected. There are big and small ballrooms. You can set a set of restriction for the big ballrooms, how many tables and how many people in a table, like the prohibition on group gathering regulation, because hotels heavily relied on weddings. I still have many questions. Okay, Under Secretary, please answer the questions about hotels and also health code charges first. Thank you. About health code and how to establish a mechanism for travelers between the two places to be exempted from the 14 days. We understand the need. One of the consideration for the system is the testing capacity as a whole. There are testings provided directly by the governments. These will be provided to the confirmed cases, suspected cases, and the close contacts, and also people returning from relatively high-risk places. They need to be put under compulsory quarantine, and testings have to be provided. For these purposes, we need to reserve capacity for these important tests. And also, we think we should reserve the testing to be carried out by non-government bodies for those economic travelers between the two places. We understand that the price is one of the major concerns of the public. So in terms of increasing the testing capacity and also bringing in more service providers in order to lower the price, we are actively looking into that. And Mr. Yu mentioned about the prohibition on group gathering regulation. The government's position is under having considered the public health risk, we can adjust the limits, and also under 599F, we have been relaxing restrictions for scheduled premises in response to industry's requests. We have been relaxing the restrictions in phases. Now the two local clusters are in areas which we can control, for example, housing estates and between colleagues. So for this type of transmission, we are able to control that. So without another large-scale outbreak or uncertainties, we can relax in phases premises under 599F, and also we can we can provide minor adjustments for the F&B business. But in terms of reviving the economy and facilitating the public movement, control of the disease is very important. But after all, we need to meet people's need for livelihood in the future. So we should relax these restrictions if it does not pose a risk to people's public health. So please tell us more when you can. So about public transport, there are no restrictions for public transport, for example, coach buses and so on. But in terms of traveling tours, they will be subject to the ban. The industry and also the tourism board have thought about carrying out disinfection before tourists board the coach bus, and we can give briefings to the tourists and also give them disinfection packages. And many people would like to join local tours. The government has increased the funding for the Green Fund from 50 million to 100 million. But if you do not relax the measures, it will not help even if you give the fund $1 billion. Now, the Tourism Council would like to set up some standards for the local industry, but the government is not relaxing it. Maybe we can be an example for the international world. If we can protect the health of the tourists in terms of catering and so on. If we can do a good job, it will be very beneficial to Hong Kong's reputation and also to jumpstart Hong Kong's tourism industry. Besides relaxation on catering business, can we also relax the tourism industry? And also about the traveling bubble. People are looking forward to that because people feel stress being locked up in Hong Kong. For example, Thailand welcomes people from Hong Kong and other places to travel there. I think more countries will would like that because the tourism industry is very important for the economy. So it is very likely to happen. And I have asked the Secretary for Food and Health, and she said it is under the purview of the Commerce and Economic Development Board. So if you follow the strict or stringent restriction, then our efforts will be all in vain. So will you consider travel bubbles, and will you follow professional advices in terms of relaxation, or are you just going to follow the old ways? And the Secretary, please. Thank you, Chair. I will tell you about the principle. When we are thinking about travel bubbles, when two places are doing quite a good job in terms of controlling the disease, and also there are mechanisms for safe travel, then discussion can start. After a bureau has the idea, then we will have to assess the risk. And also, we need to consider the tools, for example, health cooks. And also, we should bring in more service providers to lower the price. We agree with the general direction and the principle. So the issue is the details. So maybe Mr. Chen can tell us more about the control on the travel industry and transport. We have a relatively stable condition, so we are going to relax restrictions, but in phases. So we have been reopening theme parks. We have given requirements in order to control the situation. So if the epidemic further level out locally, there will be room for us to open more economic activities. We hear the members' view, and this is the direction that we'll be looking at. Of course, it depends on whether there is a resurgence of the disease, and also whether the industry can adhere to epidemic control measures when we relax the restrictions. The second round for Mr. Jie Wing-shun. I would like to follow up on the price for testing and health cooks. The prices are very different. In private hospitals in Hong Kong, a testing can cost as much as $4,000. For the cheaper ones, they cost $2,000 to $3,000. In mainland, it just costs $140. In the Red Cross Hospital in Guangzhou and in Zhuhai, $170. Of course, we have a higher cost here, but why is the price so different? The difference is 40 times higher. So for grassroots people, they cannot afford the test. Even if they want to do a test to ensure themselves, they cannot do that. We cannot just let the market to decide the price. When we have the health code system, the demand will surge. So the testing will not be cheaper. So I support a target. We should set the price at, for example, $200. We cannot let the private hospitals to set the price as high as $4,000. The demand will be very great. So the government should do a good job in gatekeeping. And also about the health code system. There are news about this mechanism. So among 10,000 travelers, 8,000 are business owners of mainland businesses. So we need to think about the health code system. Of course, not everyone will be allowed to go back once the health code system is in place. We need to have requirements and criteria, but we need to have fair criteria. Otherwise, 90% of those travelers will be business people. There are other people who need to have need to be allowed to travel.
離開咗。
Now, there are some people who want to travel to the mainland to visit their sick relatives. Would there be any humane arrangement for them? Those in business, they may not be in factory business. Some of them are in retail. Some of them are in creative work. They cannot travel to the mainland. So I think the health code should cover a broad spectrum of people instead of being lopsided to one group of people. And will you favor the 20 or so categories ahead of other people? Under Secretary, can you be more specific about the testing fees? Why is it that the neighboring places can have this done so cheap by comparison with Hong Kong, and a particular reason for that? Madam Chair, we are designing this system. If you're merely making comparison in terms of fees and charges, it would be difficult because the cost of living and other factors are at play between these different places. I'm sure that the fees charged would be of concern to the users. Of course, as I said, the government is not allowing market competition to reduce the fees. We are introducing more service providers into the market. And if we can broaden the capacity, then in a way the fees will be dragged down. Mr. Chen, any supplement? Mr. Cheng talked about the livelihood issues. Some may need to visit their sick relatives. Some will need to go across the border for personal reasons. Well, the 8,000 people are mainly factory owners. There are thousands of cross-boundary drivers as well. But there are people who do have the needs. Now, these drivers need to carry the goods back and forth. But I don't think you should confine the quota to the employers. You should have people from different sectors. Under the framework, places in the category 1 will be subject to quarantine, and members are suggesting that we should increase the quota for category 1 places as well. For category 2, when the infection is under control, there is no need for any quarantine, and we would accept the negative COVID test. By the time the situation stabilizes, there will be no need for exemption. We aim to move from the Category 1 to Category 2. When Hong Kong people are entering another place, they will have to be subject to the quarantine arrangement of the land. This is not something that the SAR government can decide. And this is something that we are in discussion with Guangdong province and Macau, and see whether by mutual recognition we can accept the quarantine arrangement. This is something under discussion. Right, round 3, Mr. Yu Shiwei. Madam Chair, thank you. The government should look at the economic development needs in developing the health code. I think the government's positioning must be sufficiently clear. It is only natural for the government to offer some subsidies in Macau and in the mainland, and they also adopt these kind of policies. The administration said that the government is under pressure and the resources should be focused on those who need to conduct the testing. With more testing, I'm sure that there would be more capacity. There are some people who would need to visit their sick relatives, and they may need to go to a funeral across the border. You should do something to help, because they find themselves in a very difficult situation. They are on meager pay, and they may have a need to visit the mainland, and they are grassroots people, and there is something happening across the border to their family, and they don't have that much of money. Can't you do something about it? What about the public hospitals? We are relaxing the restriction, but at the same time, we have to look after those who are in need. For these 4 pieces of regulations, you are moving amendments. Can you fine-tune the content in the meantime? Like, for example, we mentioned the ballroom arrangement. There is a suggestion for fine-tuning. Food and beverage services can be allowed. I mean, is this something that you can fine-tune administratively in the context of the regulation? And the Secretary? Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may take the first question first. The member asked about the mutual recognition of the health code, and there may be some residents who need to travel across the border, and some may be in financial difficulties. We have jotted this down, and when this is launched, we'll try and see whether those who are in financial difficulties can be assisted. As to how we can do it, for the time being, we don't have any specific answer. As regards the ballroom, 599F, yes, 599F and G. Now, under F, it would be for the Secretary to issue a notice. But for 599G, we may need to amend the regulation. So for F and G, we have been making amendments in the interest of effecting relaxation where possible. When necessary, we can amend the legislation. I think members are particularly concerned about the fees and charges for the health code and the time for implementation. I'm not sure whether there will be further relaxation. You might wish to make the announcement as soon as possible. Unless members have any further questions regarding policies, let's proceed to the clause-by-clause scrutiny. Let's deal with the Chinese version first. If there are any problems with regard to the English version, the legal advisor may wish to jump in. Yes, Madam Ho, PAS 116. This 116. This is to amend 599C regarding compulsory quarantine. There is going to be a two-tier system, and 599C would apply to those who remain in certain place, and if they fulfill the condition, this quarantine will not apply to them. So there are two-tier systems. Also, the period will be extended from June 6th to July 7th. In terms of the provisions, the commencement date will be the 5th of June 2020. And there will be amendments to sections 3 to 7. We amend the definition. This is a technical amendment. Now, for number 3, as we said, we have the category specified place in China, and also category 2 specified place in China. And the scope of application will be elaborated further in Clause 12. Section 3 amended. So this is the compulsory quarantine of certain persons arriving at Hong Kong. We mentioned that the category 1 and 2 is specified place in China. This is the corresponding changes. Subsection 1, the quarantine applies to or from a place in China other than Hong Kong under quarantine for a period of 14 days. And if they fulfill 599C, Category 1 and Category 2, specified place, or Category 1 and 2 as defined by Section 2 of 599E. Under these two conditions, then quarantine can be imposed for 14 days, beginning on the day of arrival in Hong Kong. That's amending the original one. Moving on to 4, Section 4. The quarantine will not apply to certain people. And we've repealed 4A, and this will be further elaborated in Clause 7. And in B, we've added a technical term. The person has not checked through the immigration control, and we added BA. We have divided Category 1 and Category 2 places, and we look at the travel history over the past 14 days, and we would regard them as having been to these specified places. And under 1, the person has been to the Category 2 places, and they haven't been to the Category 1 place where the quarantine will be imposed. and this would be regarded as having been to the places in 12.2. Madam Chair. 599C covers mainland Macau and Taiwan. Of course, some are in transit within the past 14 days, have been staying in other places. How do you find out whether, or prior to their going to mainland Macau and Taiwan, they have been to other places? Do you go by the health code, or how do you get hold of the information regarding places they've been to? Yes, for visitors to Hong Kong, they have to fill in a health declaration form. We would ask them where they've been over the past 14 days. And by looking at the declaration form, we know where they've been. If someone makes false declaration, it is against the law. But this is only an honest system, isn't it? You will not. It's only when suspicion arises, or it's only when a contact tracing is done, that you would know that they are entering Macau through a third place. So this is an honest system, isn't it?
Chair, this is not a voluntary declaration. He has to fill in the travel history honestly. If he fills it in, if he gives falsified information, that's illegal. That's against the law. If you suspect someone of giving false information, how will you investigate it? Will you follow it up with the Macau authority, or how will you do it? Because it may just be hear belief, and there's no way to follow it up. So is the declaration form useless? So of course it depends on the traveler to give a true travel history. But also we can check the flight to check his whether his version is true. But if a person has been to many places, it's very difficult to verify his travel history. If we find out that he has breached the law, we will carry out investigation and prosecution. And Chair, about the investigation and prosecution, whose responsibility is that? And do you have the authority to check a traveler's passport? Is there any concerns over privacy? Can the person cite privacy concerns or privacy rights to not provide these details? For those people who are suspected to have given false information in the declaration form, we will work with the police to investigate. Ms. Ho, please. And then Section 5. The one item has been repealed for someone entering the border from Macau via the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, and during the journey he has passed the Zhuhai section. He will not be deemed as someone who has stayed in Zhuhai. And then we have added Section 7, Paragraph A, and also the interpretation in Paragraph 5, because we've extended the definition for conveyance. In the interpretation, it says it includes an aircraft, ship, and train that operates in China. For a person who bought the conveyance at a certain place, and after the boarding, the conveyance has stopped at a stopover, and the person's journey on that conveyance ended subsequently outside that place of stopover, then Section 8 would apply. If a person did not leave the conveyance in the place of stopover, the person is not regarded as having stayed in that place of stopover. Okay, next. And then Section 4. Chief Secretary may exempt certain persons. Legal Notice number 5. Section 4 amended to allow Chief Secretary to exempt certain persons. This is just a technical amendment. In the original Section 41A3, we used the word public health emergency. The emergency meant Section 8, the public health emergency under Section 8.5 under 599 under Cap 599. So we added this definition so that we don't have to include it in the interpretation. So the newly added Section 12. Legal Notice 6. Section 12 has been added. The Secretary for Food and Health may specify places in China and conditions. We have mentioned about Category 1 and 2 places in China, so definitions are given here. For the purpose of Section 3, the Secretary for Food and Health may, by notice published in the Gazette, A. Specify any place in China other than Hong Kong as a Category 1 specified place in China, and B. Specify any place in China other than Hong Kong that is not a Category 1 specified place in China as a Category 2 specified place in China. The difference is explained in Section 12, brackets 2. For the purposes of Section 3, brackets 4BA3, the Secretary must, by notice published in the Gazette, specify conditions for a Category 2 specified place in China. This is only allowed for Category 2 places. 3. This notice is not a subsidiary legislation. 4. Before exercising the power, the Secretary must have regard to A. the extent of the spread of the specified disease in that place, and B. the public health risk posed to Hong Kong by persons arriving from that place or who have stayed in that place. Chair. And then number 13, the expiry date has been amended from the 7th of June to the midnight on the 7th of July 2020. And then moving along to 599E, compulsory quarantine of persons arriving at Hong Kong from foreign places amendments. Legal Notice 117. Mrs. Ho, please. Thank you, Chair. LN 117. The framework is similar to the amendments for 599C. First, 599E will be amended to have the two-tier systems in place. First, it will apply for those arriving in Hong Kong from a place outside China who has stayed in a Category 1 or Category 2 specified foreign place. And also, it does not apply to a person arriving in Hong Kong who has stayed in a Category 2 specified foreign place. And also, the exemption power of the CSNA has been expanded. So it is in line with our Legal Notice 116. And also, the expiry date has been changed from the 18th of June to the 18th of September, and also the other technicalities. So that number 3, this is the amendments to interpretation. So the specified foreign place are classified into Category 1 and 2, and section and also amendments to Section 4. Basically, it's the same as before. Brackets 1 was repealed to be substituted from a place outside China under quarantine for a period of 14 days beginning on the day of arrival if the person has stayed during the relevant period in any place that at the time of the person's arrival is a Category 1 specified foreign place and Category 1 specified place in China. same definition under Cap 599C. And the authorized person can, by a written order, impose compulsory quarantine order of 14 days. So I would like to ask about the definition for foreign place. Like Thailand, I mentioned, in Bangkok, it was open because the situation is better. But for Chiang Mai and other places, the epidemic is still ravaging. So are you going to designate Bangkok or Thailand as a whole as a Category 2 place? Mr. Chen, under 599E, Category 1 and Category 2 places and countries are regarded by the entire country or area as a whole. But Mr. Yu mentioned the possibility where the situation is different for a country and a single area. So how will you handle it? I believe the epidemic situation should be regarded as a whole for a country because people can travel freely within a country. So we use the country as a unit in assessing the risk brought by people coming from these places to Hong Kong, and also our travelers to their countries. What about Japan? There are 4 major islands. If we open, for example, Shikoku or Okinawa, and then we would keep on observing the situation for other places. Is that acceptable to you? Well, we cannot have an across-the-board approach. It depends on the restriction of travel within the country. If the epidemic is particularly bad in a certain district and there are no restriction of travel from that area, then the restriction applied for this area should be applied to the country as a whole. Or like Mr. Yu said, some countries may be very large in area, in size, and Hong Kong people may travel there frequently. In the regulation, it says foreign place. So if necessary, we can target at a specific foreign place rather than the country. For example, at Japan, Hokkaido is fine and maybe Tokyo is hard hit and the distance is far away. So can we target this as regulation at just a place? Mr. Mao from the DOJ. Chair. The legal framework allows differential treatment within a country. Now, one of the elements of this two-tier system is that the 14 days before arriving at Hong Kong, the person has not stayed in a Category 1 place. So if we compartmentalize different places in the country into the Category 1 and 2 places, there will be a technical difficulty. We cannot confirm whether he has traveled to Category 1 areas in that country. So it would pose difficulty in terms of enforcement because there are no obstacles inside the country to prohibit his movement. So I understand now. So the laws allow for it, but in practice, it is difficult. Let's say if we have a deal with the Japanese authority, and we know that in, say, Okinawa, the situation is good because it is far away from the Japan main islands, and you are satisfied with the prevention measures. So the law would allow us to treat this region differently. Is that right, Mr. Chen? Like our colleague said, the law allows it, but whether we would do it this way, it depends on the assessments of public health risk. Generally, if the residents are allowed to travel freely in the country, we should look at the country as a whole. I'm just talking about the law. So the law allows for it. So the officials said clearly the laws allow it, but they will take a general consideration about it. Okay, so now we're moving on to 4(2), repealing paragraph A for section 3. So I will not go into details because it's the same as before. And then 3(4)(b), repealing the original wordings and to replace by after arriving at Hong Kong. And after (3), (4), we have added BA for someone arriving from a foreign place who has not been to Category 1 places. Then the authorized person can satisfy that the last place of stay is a Category 2 place. So he will be subject to the conditions for the Category 2 place. And section 3, also about passing through the Zhuhai section of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. The traveler will not be regarded as having stayed in Zhuhai.
Also, section 6, the conveyance. We add aircraft, ships, and China, or the train that operates in China. If someone hasn't left the conveyance, then it will not be regarded as having stayed in the place of stopover. Number 5 amends section 4 for the chief executive to exempt certain persons. Here we try to bring it in line with 599C. In B, the persons traveling is necessary for the purposes relating to manufacturing operations, business activities, or the provision of professional services in the interest of Hong Kong's economic development. This is a new one. The other ones are just fine-tuning. Madam Chair, section 12 now. And this is similar to categories 1 and 2 in 599C. The Secretary for Food and Health may specify foreign places and conditions. Number 1, for the purposes of section 3, the SFH may, by notice in the Gazette, specify any place outside China as a category 1 specified foreign place, and specify any place outside China that is not a category 1 specified foreign place as a category 2 specified foreign place, and there will be some conditions imposed. And number 3, a notice is not a subsidiary legislation. And number 4, the Secretary has to have regard to the extent of the spread of the disease in that place, and also the public health risk posed to Hong Kong by the persons arriving who have stayed in that place. Expiry will be changed from June 18th to September 18th, midnight. Questions? Legal advisor. So 599C and E are pretty similar. Let's having got these out of the way, let's move on to the prevention of and control of disease. Requirements and directions, business premises, amendment number 3, regulation 2020, that's LN 118. This is to extend from June the 27th to August 31st. There's an amendment to section 14 regarding the expiry. Questions? No? Let's move on to 599G, prevention and control of disease prohibition on group gathering. Amendment number 4, regulation 2020 LN 119. Madam Chair, again, this is to extend the expiry, and This is consistent with the previous one. And Clause 3 amends Section 16 to repeal June 28th and substitute August 31st. I've got no problem with the expiry, but the book fair is being held, and Disneyland and Ocean Park are also opening up, and members are concerned about the group gathering. I think you might wish to update the situation and let us know. Mr. Yu Siwei, Madam Chair. This is extended to August the 31st, and there will be flexibility. They can be suppressed and lifted in the interim period. At the end of the day, if you were to relax across the board, would this not be allowed? And you have to have the restrictions in place prior to August 31st, or you don't have to have regard to this in the interim period. You can relax in a blanket way. Deputy Secretary, 599F and G, the Secretary can choose not to issue any directions. And if she doesn't issue any directions, there will be no restrictions. The law is there, it's just that there will be no directions. Any directions will be valid for 14 days. Otherwise, there will be a review. Legal advisor? All right, that's it for the scrutiny of the 4 pieces. And administration, any supplement? If not, like I said at the very beginning, the scrutiny period will come to an end on the 24th of June. For amendments, the notification deadline is the 17th of June. According to the usual practice, the subcommittee will, prior to the deadline, report to the House Committee regarding our deliberation. Subject to members' agreement at the Council meeting on the 24th of June, we'll be moving this motion for the scrutiny period to be extended to the first meeting of the next legislative year. Unless you have any further comments, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.